You ever watch 57 houses rise one after another on land your family spent a century bleeding for and just sit there and let them finish every last roof tile, every mailbox, every picket fence? Because I did. And no, I wasn't crazy or broken or beaten, just patient. See, the rumble of bulldozers started before the sun, those giant yellow monsters eating up pastures where 4 generations of my family raised cattle, house after house, popping up like high-priced weeds. The smell of diesel and wet concrete, God, it nearly choked out everything that ever meant home to me. And right at the center of it all, morning after morning stood Vivian Ashford Cross in her spotless white Tesla, waving her clipboard around like some HOA Napoleon suburban royalty, smug as you please. She stole my ranch through backroom county deals right while I was burying my folks. And just to rub salt in the wound, she'd wave at me from the driveway, "Thanks for being so reasonable about progress." That's what she'd yell. And people, even my own sister, figured I'd given up. But let me ask you, what would you do if you still controlled the only thing that mattered? Something nobody in that circus even bothered to check. Because that's what I had. The old dam upstream. 80 years old, built by my granddad when the Army Corps wanted to save Denver from spring floods. I was just waiting, watching, timing's everything. Stick with me, because this is how one stubborn rancher played the long game against the kind of corruption that wears a press suit and calls itself progress. 6 months back, it started with a knock at my door. Expensive perfume slicing through the morning air, thick with cattle dust and black coffee. The Whitmore Ranch, 340 acres of Colorado high country. Here the land owns you, not the other way around. My great-granddad homesteaded in 1889. Granddad built the dam in 43. My folks expanded things right up until a patch of black ice took them both January 23. Left me and my sister Della with a ranch older than NASA and a water system most people wouldn't know what to do with. Della's a school teacher, practical as a fence post, never afraid to dig in. I'd call her my secret weapon, but that'd give away too much too soon. Vivian. She moved to Pine Ridge Falls December 2022. Left behind a trail of perfume and, I swear, corruption. You could see if the sun hit her just right. She'd been a corporate lawyer in Denver, the kind of woman who spent more on her highlights than I did on truck repairs. HOA president before her moving boxes, hit the curb red flag right there. By February, she's at every county meeting sounding alarms about environmental emergencies. Her voice sweet as honey, but what she was selling was pure poison. She had charts so slick they'd make a used car salesman blush, photos of our land looking like a disaster zone. She claimed our cattle were poisoning the watershed, our pastures turning into toxic mud threatening 23,000 innocent residents. The county commissioner, Blake Torrance, whose golf game, by the way, magically improved after free lessons from Vivian's husband, nodded along like he'd rehearsed it. She pushed for emergency rezoning, a 48-hour steamroll, no public comment, no warning. Folks, if you ever hear emergency tied to land or zoning, demand the paperwork. I'm telling you, most of those claims are baked up in back rooms. Next thing, certified mail arrives. Boundary dispute resolution. Sounds polite, right? Like calling a fire a thermal event. Next morning, Vivian shows up with surveyors, legal docs, and a deputy who looked like he'd rather be fishing. She calls out, "Clipboard high, I hope we can handle this like civilized adults." I tip my hat, playing it slow. She says, "Your family's had a good run, but progress requires sacrifice. This land serves the greater good now." That's when I realized theft's still theft, even when it wears pearls. A couple weeks later, the real invasion began. Dawn diesel engines growling past my window, 5 bulldozers, 2 excavators, every last one of them flattening what my family spent lifetimes building. Vivian's directing the show in an outfit that screamed fashion disaster meets demolition derby. Her workers. Later I'd learned she told them to wave at me every morning, psychological warfare HOA style. Deputy Kane dropped by, told me his hands were tied, civil matter. He looked like he wanted to spit nails. The Pine Ridge Gazette delivered the next slap, local rancher blocks community development. Reporter had only talked to Vivian, of course. I was cast as the stubborn obstacle blocking affordable housing. The quote that stuck with me: "It's time for the old ways to make room for the new. Like folks who feed the country are just in the way." But while Vivian was playing the PR game, Della was down in the courthouse basement digging through old documents. The smell of that place mildew paper lost hopes. She found the 1889 grant turns, Out our land stretched 60 feet further than their survey claimed. And the water rights? They were listed separate from the land. That's the Colorado twist. Most folks miss water rights go to the first user, not whoever owns the dirt. That night I called Dad's old Army buddy, Tommy Chainlink McGrath, civil engineer now. He hears me out and says, "Son, you don't just own that water, you control it. Every drop flows through your dam first." That hit me like a lightning bolt. Those houses, every single one, was built in a flood path. I held the keys. But Vivian wasn't done. April, she weaponized social media. Family safety Facebook group posts popping up about dangerous ranchers, kids in peril, contamination, you name it. She held town meetings, handed out glossy pamphlets, terrified people with horror stories about the water. None of it true. The bacteria she kept harping on came from a broken septic tank upstream. But try explaining that to scared parents. The economic squeeze followed. Rusty's Diner dropped Whitmore beef. Pete apologized, but he had mouths to feed. My feed prices shot up overnight. Dayla faced the firing squad at school, parents grilling her about my threatening activities. The PTA president, Linda, actually said Della's family situation might be compromising her teaching. Della just smiled and suggested Linda stick to multiplication tables. Then came the knockout Judge Caldwell. Emergency hearing, 23 minutes restraining order. The evidence, security footage, me driving by checking fences. It was spun into preparing for war. I couldn't even visit my folks' graves without risking arrest. But Della kept digging. Tommy reviewed blueprints and found out the permits were for single-family homes, yet these were luxury rentals with commercial-level parking. Massive violation. Vivian gambled no one would notice. She was wrong. May 1st, the state health inspectors showed up, hazmat suits, TV cameras. The water was clean enough to baptize a baby, but somehow the lab tests flagged contamination. Turns out the lab was owned by a company tied to Vivian's husband. By noon, the news had environmental crisis in Pine Ridge splashed all over. The court ordered my ranch shut down, couldn't move cattle, couldn't even mow the grass. While Vivian put on her environmental puppet show, Della found the golden ticket federal dam documents from '43. The Army Corps manual spelled it out: mandatory water releases during peak snowmelt late May to prevent downstream floods. Federal law overrides every other claim. I showed Tommy. His eyes went wide. Every one of those houses violates federal floodplain regs. Their insurance is void. Their mortgages are illegal. They could lose everything overnight. See Memorial Day weekend, prime time for flood control. The law said I had to open those gates. It wasn't just a choice anymore. Della found the last piece, a safety deposit box Dad kept for important papers. Inside was the original Army Corps agreement. Black and white proof that our dam, our releases were federal law. Page 32, May 23rd to 25th peak snowmelt mandatory water release. And here's the catch: Vivian had scheduled her grand opening for May 25th. The choice was brutal. I could destroy empty houses or let families move in and get crushed by federal seizure and bankruptcy. Both would hurt. But I knew which pain I could live with. We prepped. Tommy and I spent weeks restoring the dam, wrestling with 80-year-old machinery. Dela coordinated with investigative journalist Rebecca Morrison, who uncovered that Vivian's husband was selling insurance that wouldn't cover federal flood events. The FBI started sniffing around, federal investigators circled environmental groups, lined up lawsuits. The clock ticked. The last week, Vivian's people turned up the heat: private security, surveillance, harassment. But the cracks were showing. Her finances were a house of cards, and every delay cost her dearly. Our neighbor Helena, invisible at 73, found proof Vivian was mortgaged to the hilt. She was desperate. May 23rd, here's where it all converged. 5:47 a.m. Tommy and I at the dam, hands shaking but steady. We pulled those pins and the rumble started, a wall of snowmelt and honest justice barreling down the spillway, roaring through Sunset Meadows like the truth finally let loose. Vivian showed up, saw her dream turned into a swimming pool, screamed sabotage. But the feds were already there, warrants in hand. That night town meeting, Vivian tried to spin it as unprecedented disaster. I walked to the front with the Army Corps manual. We followed the law, I said. Silence, then applause, then justice. FBI slapped cuffs on Vivian and her husband. Fraud, conspiracy, environmental violations, the works. Judge Caldwell was disbarred. Rusty's Diner served Whitmore beef again, and the land became protected wetland. My ranch got restored, the dam got upgraded. The Water Education Center went up where those 57 houses briefly stood. And me. These days I sit on my porch, coffee steaming sunrise, painting the Rockies Willow Creek running free. Sometimes I talk to school kids about patience, how sometimes it's not weakness, it's strategy. Nature doesn't negotiate. Water finds its level. And if you ever wonder what justice sounds like, it's the roar of snowmelt flattening a field of illegal houses while a whole valley remembers what the truth smells like. Let me throw it to you. What would you have done? Flood the empty houses. Let families move in and lose everything. Is it justice or revenge to let nature do what it was always meant to do? Drop your thoughts below. And if you've ever faced down power with nothing but patience and paperwork, share your story. I'm all ears.